The morning air still clung to the chill of dawn as I stood on the porch, my suitcases lined up beside me like witnesses to a life that had just been erased. The funeral flowers were still fresh on my coat, their scent mixing with the cold sting of betrayal settling in my chest. Behind me, the door clicked shut, soft, final, deliberate, and I felt the world tilt in a way I wasn't prepared for. If you've ever felt the ground shift under you because of someone you trusted, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Moments like this stay with you. I didn't know it then, but this was only the first crack in everything I thought I understood. Let me show you how it all began. I never imagined I would be standing on a front porch with my suitcases still warm from the funeral home's air, hearing the door close behind me as if I were a stranger. My name is Margaret Parker, and the day after I buried my son, I found myself pushed out of the only place that still felt connected to him. The shock of it settled into my bones before I could fully grasp what was happening. Grief has a way of hollowing you out, but betrayal carves its own kind of emptiness, sharp and unforgettable. I remember the weight of my bags, the heaviness in my chest, and the numb disbelief as I walked down the driveway. It felt unreal, like my life had been picked up and shaken without warning. I kept replaying the past week in my mind, searching for some explanation, some sign that this was coming. But all I found was the ache of losing my son and the sting of being discarded so easily. Standing alone on that quiet street, I felt stripped of everything familiar. Part of me wanted to crumble right there, and another part whispered that I needed to stay upright, at least long enough to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this moment wasn't the beginning of the story. To make sense of how I ended up on that porch with nowhere to go, I have to go back to where it all started, before the grief, before the fracture, before I ever moved into that home. Before everything fell apart, my life was quieter, simpler. I'm a retired school secretary who spent most of her days tending a small house in Akron, the one my husband and I bought when our son, Daniel, was still learning to walk. After my husband passed, that house started feeling too big, too empty. So when Daniel mentioned he and his wife, Emily, were looking for a place with more space, I offered to help. Selling my home freed up enough for me to contribute to their down payment, and the plan was that I would stay with them for a little while until I figured out my next step. At first, it felt comforting to be part of their daily rhythm. I cooked most evenings, kept up with small chores, and tried to make the house feel warm. Daniel always made sure I knew he appreciated it, and those moments helped fill the quiet places in my heart. With Emily, things were different. She was polite, careful, almost distant. Nothing harsh, nothing dramatic, just a sense that she preferred the house running in a way I hadn't learned to read yet. Still, I tried to stay out of the way, telling myself that all families adjust in their own time. I never imagined how fragile that balance really was, or how quickly everything would change. The night it all shattered is still etched into me, and it's the moment my life took a turn I could never have prepared for. It was the night that split my life into a before and an after. I remember being pulled out of sleep in the early hours, the kind of moment when the world feels blurry and fragile. Something in the way the phone rang made my stomach tighten before I even reached for it. I didn't hear words as much as I felt them, an urgency, a fear, and suddenly I was on my feet, grabbing whatever I could, praying I was misunderstanding what my body already knew. The drive to the hospital felt both endless and impossibly short. The roads were dark, the sky still heavy, and I kept trying to steady my breath. I remember the sharp smell of disinfectant when I walked through the doors, the coldness of the tile beneath my shoes, and the quiet murmur of nurses moving with practiced calm. Everything around me felt too bright and too distant at the same time. When I finally found Daniel, the truth settled over me with a weight I had never carried before. My son, my only child, was gone. I felt my knees weaken, and the room seemed to tilt, but inside there was only a quiet, aching stillness. Standing beside him, I traced the familiar shape of his hand and tried to memorize every part of him, knowing I would never see him wake again. Emily was there too, standing a little apart. Her face was unreadable, a kind of stillness I couldn't decipher in that moment. I told myself it was her way of coping, that we all grieve differently. But something about it stayed with me, settling into the back of my mind. The hours that followed blurred together until morning came, ushering us toward the funeral arrangements and the days that would reveal how much more was beginning to shift around me. The days between Daniel's passing and the funeral felt like moving through thick fog, every step heavier than the last. I tried to keep myself useful, focusing on the small tasks I could manage, making calls, choosing flowers, ironing the black dress I hadn't worn since my husband's service. Staying busy was the only thing that kept me from collapsing under the weight of what had happened. Emily, on the other hand, carried herself with a polished composure that stunned me. She looked immaculate at every meeting with the funeral director, her voice steady, her posture firm. But behind that calm exterior, something had shifted. There was a distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a coolness that brushed past me each time we moved through decisions together. I kept telling myself it was grief taking a different shape for her, but the feeling lingered like a draft in a closed room. The moment that truly unsettled me came late one afternoon, when I walked past the study and caught the faint sound of her talking in a low, clipped tone. I couldn't make out every word, but the ones that reached me were enough. Mentions of extra costs, unexpected expenses, and a frustration that felt oddly directed at my presence in the house. Hearing that so soon after losing Daniel felt like a cold hand tightening around my heart. I remember standing still, absorbing what those words implied, feeling a quiet ache turn into something sharper. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let myself fully process it. But a part of me knew then that something deeper was shifting beneath the surface, something that would soon spill into the open. By the time the funeral ended and we returned home, I could feel the ground starting to move beneath my feet, hinting at the moment that would change everything. In the quiet after the funeral, the house felt unfamiliar, as if the warmth Daniel brought to it had vanished overnight. I sensed the shift the moment we walked through the door. Emily moved with a brisk determination, her eyes avoiding mine, her posture stiff. It didn't take long for me to understand what that meant. There was a finality in the way she carried herself, an unspoken message that my place in the home had ended along with my son's life. The realization struck harder than I expected. I had helped build this life with them, contributed to the down payment, filled the rooms with meals and small comforts. Yet suddenly, I felt like a guest who had overstayed. Her cold distance settled into the walls, leaving no space for me to breathe. I remember standing at the foot of the stairs, feeling the weight of that truth pressing down on my chest. packing my things felt surreal. I folded clothes with trembling hands, each piece carrying memories of days that felt impossibly far away. The house was so still that even the sound of my suitcase zipper felt intrusive. I kept waiting for something, an explanation, a moment of softness, but the silence only deepened, confirming what I already knew. When I rolled my suitcases out to the car, the air outside felt sharper, almost cleansing, though it stung. Driving to a modest hotel on the edge of town, I struggled to steady my breath. The room I checked into was small, neat, impersonal, and for the first time in years, I felt truly untethered. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly and what on earth I was supposed to do next. The hotel room became my world for those first days, a small box of beige walls and humming vents that felt both safe and painfully temporary. I moved slowly, as if my body were still trying to understand everything it had lost. Grief hung over me like a heavy coat, and beneath it lived a quieter fear I couldn't shake. I had some savings tucked away, but not enough to drift for long. Each night, I laid awake doing the math in my head, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach tighten. During the afternoons, I sat at the small desk by the window, scrolling through listings for apartments I knew I couldn't afford. The prices blurred together, each one a reminder that I was starting from almost nothing. It was overwhelming, thinking about rebuilding a life at my age, without Daniel, without a home, without a clear next step. Still, I kept looking, telling myself that staying busy was better than sinking into the emptiness pressing at the edges of my thoughts. Then the unexpected happened. My phone buzzed one morning, and when I recognized the number, a strange mix of confusion and tension washed over me. It was my son's attorney. Hearing his name brought a rush of emotions I wasn't prepared for. He asked me to come in for the will reading, and something in his tone made my heart catch. I couldn't tell if it was worry or hope rising in me, but I felt the ground shift ever so slightly. As I sat back on the edge of the bed, the room felt different, less like an ending and more like a pause before something I didn't yet understand. I gathered myself, knowing I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Walking into the attorney's office felt like stepping into a place where the air itself held its breath. The waiting room was quiet, polished, and too bright. I noticed Emily already seated, perfectly put together, her posture crisp with an air of confidence. She glanced at me only briefly, and in that moment I sensed a kind of certainty radiating from her, as if she already knew exactly how this would unfold. I sat across from her, trying to calm the flutter in my chest, unsure of what to expect. When we were called in, the air grew heavier. I listened as the attorney reviewed the will, his tone steady and practiced. Most of what he described matched what I had assumed. Daniel's assets transferring to Emily, the house, the accounts, everything he had built. I felt no jealousy, only an ache, because all of it was just a reminder of the life he worked so hard to create. Emily sat taller as each item was listed, almost glowing with a kind of quiet triumph. Then the shift happened. The attorney paused, glancing at me with a softness that made my heart tighten. He mentioned an additional provision, something Daniel had arranged separately. My name, a safety deposit box, instructions meant solely for me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Shock mingled with confusion, and a cautious flicker of hope rose in my chest. Across the table, I felt Emily's composure crack. Her shoulders stiffened, and a sharp tension filled the room. The certainty she carried in with her began to unravel. The attorney slid a sealed envelope toward me, thick and heavy in my hands. I held it carefully, feeling the weight of whatever Daniel had left behind. As I stepped out of the office into the cool afternoon air, the envelope pressed against my palm. I knew my son had kept something from both of us, something that would change everything once I opened that box. The bank felt colder than I remembered, its marble floors echoing softly as I followed the manager toward the vault. I kept one hand wrapped around the sealed envelope, feeling the faint texture of Daniel's signature beneath my thumb. My heart beat unevenly, caught between dread and a strange, fragile hope. When the metal drawer slid out in front of me, the weight of the safety deposit box startled me. It felt heavier than something its size should ever be, as if it carried every unanswered question of the past few months. Inside, on top of neatly arranged folders, was a single envelope with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. Seeing those familiar loops and curves weakened my breath. For a moment, I just held it, letting the presence of his handwriting wash over me like a final embrace. When I opened it, his voice came back to me, not in words I heard, but in memories that rose from the page. He told me he knew I had sacrificed more than I ever admitted. He thanked me for loving him unconditionally, and then, gently, he warned me that he feared I might one day need protection. Beneath the letter were documents, investment accounts he had built quietly over the years, all tied back to the money I once gave him to help buy the house. He had grown it into something far larger, something meant for me. And then the part that made my chest tighten. Carefully dated records he had kept of moments when he felt Emily had crossed lines with me, subtle slights I had brushed off, behaviors I convinced myself were nothing. He had seen it all. He had prepared for it all. Shock gave way to an aching grief, and then, slowly, to something steadier, validation, and a strength I hadn't expected to feel again. My son had protected me even after he was gone. When I stepped out of the bank into the cool afternoon breeze, I carried the folders close to my chest. The world looked different, sharper, clearer. I wasn't walking out as the same woman who walked in. I had truth in my hands, and I knew exactly where I needed to take it next. When I walked up the familiar driveway, the folders pressed against my side, I felt a steadiness I hadn't known in weeks. The house looked the same as it always had, but I wasn't the same woman who had once lived inside it. My steps were calm, measured. I wasn't there to win anything back. I was there to reclaim myself. When Emily opened the door, I saw it immediately. The forced composure, the strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was a flicker of something else, too, a nervous tremor in the way she held her hands, as if she already sensed the ground beneath her shifting. I stepped inside, carrying with me the quiet truth of everything Daniel had left. The air in the room felt tight, filled with a tension neither of us tried to hide. As I began sharing what I had learned, I watched her closely. I didn't need raised voices or sharp words. The simple weight of the facts was enough. The color drained from her face in slow degrees, her posture collapsing from confidence into something hollow. Her eyes darted from the folders to my expression, searching for mercy or denial, but I offered neither. I only offered honesty. The records Daniel kept, the accounts he protected in my name, the letter filled with love and warnings. Each revelation seemed to unravel another thread in her carefully stitched facade. She sank under the truth long before I finished. I could feel her fear, her regret, her panic swirling in the silence between us. A younger version of myself might have wanted to lash out, to demand apologies, to make her feel every ounce of the pain she caused. But standing there, I realized I no longer needed anything from her, not validation, not remorse, not even understanding. Justice had already found its way to me through my son's foresight. My dignity was intact, untouched by her choices. When I turned to leave, I felt no triumph, only clarity. The door behind me closed with a soft click, and with it, I let go of the last weight she had ever placed on my shoulders. Ahead of me waited a different kind of peace, one I was finally ready to claim. As I stepped away from that house for the last time, the air felt different on my skin, lighter, almost warm, even though the day itself was nothing special. It was the feeling of something lifting, a quiet release I hadn't known I was waiting for. I walked toward my car with the simple understanding that I wasn't carrying her bitterness anymore. I was carrying my son's love. What Daniel left behind wasn't revenge or punishment. It was protection. It was his way of holding my hand long after he was gone, making sure I had the truth, the means to stand on my own, and the clarity to finally let go. For the first time since losing him, I felt a soft peace settle into the spaces grief once filled. I know now that healing isn't loud, it's steady. It's choosing not to carry what doesn't belong to you. It's recognizing when justice has already done its work, and when it's time to step forward into something new. If you've listened this far, thank you for sharing this moment with me. Life has a way of breaking us open, but it also offers chances to rebuild in ways we never expected. If you've ever faced something that forced you to find your strength again, I hope you'll share your story below. I read every comment, and you never know who might need your words. Thank you for spending this time with me and walking through a story that carried both heartbreak and unexpected strength. I know many people have faced moments where life forced them to rebuild in ways they never imagined. And if any part of my journey speaks to something in your own, I hope you'll share it below. Your stories matter more than you know. If this resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you liked the video and subscribed for more reflections like this. Your support truly helps me keep going.